Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Living with Inclusion. I am just currently doing some studying, some work. Got my MCAT books out because I'm applying to med schools, hopefully, fingers crossed on that MCAT score. And today we are talking about university, disability, and accommodations. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today we're talking about disability and university and accommodations. Accommodations are what you put in place in university so that if you have a disability, you're able to manage university and your disability and still succeed. Every university in Canada and the US are legally mandated to make university accessible to those with disabilities. And I'm not just talking physical accessibility. This is for studying, for attending classes, for completing projects, and being able to complete quizzes, tests, and exams. There are a variety of accommodations that you can get put in place that will help you succeed in college and university, whichever one you want to do, and whatever program you want to complete. So if you are going to university, you're starting soon, or you're starting college, and you have a disability, first thing that you'd want to do is you want to find out what are the accessibility plans at your university or college. Your school, but I'm going to say university a lot because I'm a university student and that's just the world I live in, is I'm in university a lot. I'm in classes a lot. And so as a student with a disability, you're going to want to have an accessibility advisor. That's what they call it at my school. They can be called something different, but relatively close to accessibility advisors. And these are people who specifically work one-on-one. When I say one-on-one, they have a lot of students on their caseload, but they work with each student to put accommodations in plan to make sure that they can succeed in their university program with their disability. So let's look at types of accommodation. First of all, at the start of a semester, start your accessibility plan. You want to do it, you want to put it in right at the start of the semester, submit your accommodations, get everything started, because the last thing you want to do is be halfway through a project, notice that you're not able to meet the deadline, and you need an extension, and it's, you have a disability that has impacted the fact that you need an extension, and then you have to get your accommodation plan put in place, request this extension, and email your prof. That's a lot to do at once, especially when you're already stressed about a deadline. So start of the semester, put in your accommodation plan, get it started, get it done with, make sure all your profs know that you have this plan, which your accessibility advisors handle. They will email that to your profs. So then when you need an extension, you just have to send an email to the prof saying, hey, as per my accommodations plan, I'm needing a 72-hour extension on this project. That's all you gotta say. And then it's there. It's a great tool to have. Put it in place as soon as you can. You're gonna need to renew it each semester, most likely. I would like to note that I speak from personal experience. I'm not an expert in this field. I've been a university student for 5 years now, and I have several disabilities. So I got some insight, and that's what I'm sharing today. If you are wondering more about accessibility and accommodations in your school specifically, search it up. You can search up school's name, accessibility, accommodations, put all those words in there, it'll come up. And then you know what your school offers, what you can ask for. And if they don't have what you need, you can ask for that too. Just because it's not written that this is offered often doesn't mean that you can't request that as an accessibility element. So let's start off with types of accommodations. Assistive technology. So there's tons of technology that you can get to assist you inside and outside the classroom. iPads now, the iPad Pro counts as an assistive technology. The Apple Pencil with those counts as assistive technology. There is technology that can read text to you, so text to speech, and there's also speech to text functions. Both great tools to use. There are live scribe pens. This is it's a type of pen that when you take notes, you can write down a note with this pen, and as you write, it records what's being said. Then when you go and download your notes at home, you can actually watch as you've written that note. You can click on it, you can tap it, and it will give you the recording of what was said during that time. This can be really helpful if you struggle to take detailed notes and have focus on the lecture, take notes, and be present. If that's a struggle for you for any reason, then a live scribe pen can be very handy. Another assistive technology is programs that zoom text. So if you're reading something and you need text needs to be larger, there is programs for that. There is also physical equipment that you can have in the classroom. For myself, I use a wheelchair when I'm at the university, and this means that I can't always wheel up to the space in the classroom. So I tend to have a desk in each classroom that is height adjustable. They just keep them in each of the classrooms because I'm not the only one who is going to need that. And you can set your stuff up there. I just recommend making sure that your university knows about this at the start of your program, because then you don't have to worry about showing up the first day and you don't have a place to sit. I've done it. It was not fun. So tell them at the start, get that done right off the bat. Same with the accessibility plan. You're gonna want to do that right off the bat. Now, if you're thinking, RJ, you have said a lot of different items here, but they cost money. That's true. Accessibility devices, we all know, they cost an arm and a leg usually. And I only have 2 arms and 2 legs, so I cannot afford many accessibility devices. But what you can do is some universities and colleges have lending programs where the university has these items in a library sense, where students with disabilities can sign out these items and try them out. It's a great way to see if it'll be helpful to you. Then also within Canada, each province has a certain amount of money set aside that students with disabilities can access, and it's a grant for assistive technology. Some provinces call it goods and services grant, and that is a great name for it, I think, because it reflects the goods such as assistive technology, these live scribe pens, getting a laptop, a tablet, anything that's going to help you out in the classroom. Generally, you can apply for under this grant. And then the services is the other element of it, where say you would benefit from having a tutor. You need a note taker in the class. These services can be paid for through this grant too. It's amazing. I know that they're pretty high up as far as the grants that I've qualified for. I can qualify for up to $20,000 in goods and services per academic year. It's rare that I would ever need to use that for my disabilities, but it's there, which is what is awesome to know. So if there's any goods and services, look up, if you're in Canada, look it up on your provincial website about disabilities. Usually you apply for it while you apply for student aid. If you don't apply for student aid usually, because maybe you don't need student loans, that's okay. But to access these grants, you're going to need to apply for student loans. And if they give you any money, you don't have to accept it either. Or you can keep it and then give it back. It's a loan system like that. But most of the time you're gonna have to apply. So don't be too worried. Don't think, oh, I don't qualify for student loans, so I won't qualify for this. No, if you have a disability, you can qualify for the disability grants that are through the student loan systems. Let's move on. Another kind of accommodation is alternative formatting for class formats, such as if you're doing online learning, if they're giving you PDFs to read, if they're presenting videos, all of that. There are accommodations to make it so that you can comprehend the material. So if they're presenting a video and say you're visually impaired, then you may want to have you probably do want to have the accommodation where you have a described video format, because you want to know what people are seeing without being able to fully see everything. And so also, if there's a video and you are hard of hearing, then you'll probably request to have closed captions on everything to understand what's being said. Also, within the classroom, if you use ASL to communicate in your daily life, and so usually you're hard of hearing or deaf, then you can have an interpreter in the class. That's also something that can usually be funded under that goods and services grant, is the ASL interpreter. The government will pay for that through the university, or the university will pay for that through the government. That's the order I mean. Thank you. Another accommodation is alternative testing conditions. If you want to /need to write your exams and tests and quizzes in a space that's not the classroom, that can be requested. Usually you're not writing fully alone. You'll have someone in the room to proctor the exam, and then you will also maybe have a few other people there, but it's much less than writing in a large class of, say, 60 students, larger sometimes. I've had classes where I've had 500 in a lecture hall, or in large exam settings. So you can have the accommodation where you write in a separate space. With writing in a separate space, another accommodation you can have is extension for time on these exams and quizzes. Most people get time and a half when they request this accommodation, but you can have varying degrees of amount of time depending on your disability and how much time you need to complete an exam or a quiz. And the whole idea with accommodations is you're leveling the playing field. You're not taking advantage of a system. This is things that, because we have disabilities, that we need to complete our studies. So I know it can be very hard to accept having accommodations, but if you need time and a half to write a test, that's okay. Some people might need time and a half because they take breaks during their writing. Sometimes they have a tough time focusing and staying on that one area of topic for so long. And there's a variety of reasons why someone's going to need more time to write a quiz or an exam. So use it if that's what you need. Apply for that accommodation. It's very often that one's an easy one to get. They don't generally turn people down for that one. This next one can be a little harder to get. I know that because I have it, and it took a little bit more paperwork, but you can get cue sheets for exams and quizzes and tests. A cue sheet is not a cheat sheet. It is a reference sheet from your notes. What that means is that if you have a tough time with short-term memory, working memory, or focus and concentration, sometimes a cue sheet can be helpful because you can write down an acronym that you use to study. You can write down anything that's going to jog your memory to remember what you studied. I love having cue sheets. Now, one thing about cue sheets is they don't just let you bring them right into the exam. They don't just say, yes, bring whatever you'd like. They want to see them beforehand. So your prof has to, in my case, the prof has to accept the cue sheet and can make edits before it's used, which means it can be a back and forth process. This means that I have to submit a cue sheet 7 days before the quiz, exam, or test that I want to use. And then the prof will either approve it, make edits, send it back, however that will look. Now, this means that I will not always submit cue sheets, even though they're very handy for me, because as much as I try to study in advance, I may not have my cue sheet ready 7 days in advance. And that's okay. I try my best. Sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't. And so it's an accommodation I have in place, and if I know I need it, I'm going to study that far in advance. But if there's something where I'm like, I'm not using a lot of acronyms for this, the content doesn't need it for me, then I might not use that. And that is up to me, but it's in place. So if I need it, I have it. And that's the whole thing with accommodations. Sometimes you overshoot and you might not use any of these at all during the semester. But I'm telling you, that one time you need it, you're gonna want to have it. Another accommodation is deferring deadlines and getting extensions on projects, tests, quizzes, papers, all that jazz. So in my case, I have that one because sometimes my disability impacts my time management. It impacts the schedule that I set out for myself. I'm a very organized person, not always room-wise, but with my schoolwork and my work, I am very organized. But sometimes things happen with my disability where I cannot do work that day, and then that might throw off my plan. Even if I buffer in time to change that plan, it might not happen. And so sometimes I look and I'm like, there's no way that I can feasibly, without harming my state of being, complete this project on time. I need an extra day or 2 or 3. And most accommodations plans will give you up to 3 days to defer deadline, to move it within 3 days. But if you need more than that, that's when you just have to talk with your accessibility advisor, explain a little bit what's going on, and say, hey, I'm needing a little more time than this. And they can work with the prof to help you get that extra time. One of the few final accommodations we're going to talk about is note-taking. And note-taking is one that I think almost any student with a disability is going to request and should request sometime. Okay, I can't say should. I'm going to say what you should be requesting because I don't know your disability. But often disabilities impact our ability to attend class physically, which means that having a note taker in a class can be immensely helpful because it's usually a student in the class who is already taking notes, and they have been nice enough to upload those notes for students with disabilities to view. Now, with that, to be a note taker in a class, at our school, they'll pay you. Most schools will because there's funding to hire note takers. So they'll pay you for your class notes. It's someone who's already in the class, already taking notes, and the notes don't have to be pristine. Like we need to be able to read them, and they need to be in good format and cover the general concepts and what's happening in the class, but they're not meant to word for word say exactly what was said in the class and catch every little detail. No. Note-taking levels the playing field for students with disabilities. So if we can't take notes during class ourselves, awesome, someone else is taking them down, we can review them later. We couldn't attend class that day for any reason, awesome, I missed class, I have a note taker. I can look at what was said. You need to review them later on. That's all we need, is we're leveling the playing field. So your notes don't have to be pristine. Please do not stress about how exact your notes are if you are a note taker. We appreciate the effort, for sure, but we don't want you to get so stressed out that you feel like you can't do it. A lot of people can do note taking, and I would love if more people step forward, because there's so many times in a class where I actually don't get a note taker some days, or some semesters, because people are too worried about that their notes aren't good enough, or that they can't take them consistently enough. And so please, if it's something you're considering, I'd say go for it. Give it a try. And it can help out a student in the class, and you can make a little extra money. Please note that there are accommodations that are in place for a whole semester. There's also temporary accommodations. If something happens in your family that, I say family because a lot of times what happens is sometimes there's a death in the family, or an illness or anything in your life overall that directly impacts your ability to participate in school, you can get temporary accommodations put in place. Sometimes these are also called emergency accommodations. I have had them in the past, and I actually had emergency accommodations for I think a year before I put in permanent accommodations. And it's just because with my disability onsetting, I wasn't too sure what was going on. I didn't know if I qualified for accommodations fully, didn't know the systems. And so I would go to some of our resources at the school, and I'd be like, I have to take a test today. and I have been dissociating for 3 days on and off, but it's been so consistent, I haven't been able to study, and I'm going to fail this test. And I've had those individuals, the professionals I've seen at the school, I've had them, bring me over to couple services. The one is Human Rights and Equity Services was able to put through emergency accommodations at my school and defer that test. But if I had a permanent accommodations plan like I do now, I could let someone know, or if I'm capable, to email my prof myself and say, I'm going to need to defer this test. And that's all I have to say because I already have this plan in place. These are just a few accommodations that you can get in the classroom, and there's so many. If you are in high school right now and you're just going into university and you have a disability that impacts your cognitive functions, the most common disability that I'm referring to in this case is ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder. Then I recommend getting a psychoeducational assessment if it's available to you. Usually before you turn 18, you can get it through government funding, and a psychoeducational assessment will include accommodation plan suggestions. So you can bring those to a university as soon as you start and say, hey, I've had this assessment done. These are the suggestions that a professional has made that I'm going to need in the classroom, and then they will implement those right from there. You don't need to have that assessment by any means. It's just if it's an option, if it's available to you, it's a very helpful tool to have when going into university. But if that's not an option, no worries. What colleges and universities have is usually a form that you complete with your doctor. You send it to them or your psychologist, health professional, to write out what you need. In my case, that form included what my disabilities were, when the onset, how long they'll affect me, so prognosis, and then also what supports I'm going to need, what accommodations I'm going to need. And that's where they write those elements down. You want to talk with your healthcare professional when you ask them to fill this out to make sure that what they're writing down you agree with you're going to need, because otherwise you're going to do a lot more back and forth than you want to. And with a disability, we're already spending so much time managing our disabilities. So yeah, just have that conversation right off the bat if you can. Say, hey, these, and look into accommodations that are available. Look into what you might need, what you think is helpful, and then ask your healthcare provider if they agree, if they're willing to write that in, if they're willing to submit that on your behalf, and then you can get those accommodations in place. Diagnosis is also, there's a privilege in diagnosis. Not everyone gets diagnosed early. Not everyone has the proper healthcare professionals to diagnose them. And so if your school, if you are at a large enough university, they might have professionals there who are willing to write down the diagnoses for the terms of accommodations. In my case, at my school, we have a health clinic. And so I actually have a doctor there who could write down all these elements, do my assessment, and all of that. So those options might be available. Look at it, check it out, see what there is, and I hope this helps. And again, I didn't cover all the accommodations because there's so many, you can have so many. So please look into what you might need. If you think about, hey, I can need this, try and request it. See what happens. Just because it's not written down yet does not mean you can't have it. So a great example of this is I actually know someone who needed what would be called a cue sheet nowadays, but it was a few years ago before cue sheets were a thing at our university. And so they needed this item that could jog their memory. And it was just acronyms and words that just jog the memory to remember what to focus on. And so they brought that to their accessibility advisor, and it was accepted. They said, yeah, I don't see why you couldn't have that. That's not cheating. You're just jogging your memory. And now that's an accessibility aid that's available at my university, at least, to any student that requests it. And so that's just to say, just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean you can't have it. I highly recommend giving it a try. The worst they can tell you is no. And if they tell you no, and they don't have a good reason for it, you can still ask for it when it comes to accommodations and accessibility. Sometimes they have to say no because it doesn't make sense at first. But with a good enough explanation and especially health professional support, you can usually work with your school to determine what's needed and to get accommodations that are going to help you succeed. So, thank you for joining my channel today. If you thought this was helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel. I do all things about disability and daily life and university right now because I'm in university. So I have some information to share. If you have any questions, please comment them below, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.